Okay, welcome to our next YouTube video. We are working on chapter 4 in unit number 10, and what we're going to cover is the role of climate and the environment, what it does and what it creates on our ecosystems found on this planet. So the first thing that I'd like to point out to you is that if you've ever seen the movie Star Wars, George Lucas does a great job at displaying different ecosystems and different biomes within his movie. The easiest one to understand is while he has a whole planet that is a desert, he took the idea that we have so many different biomes and ecosystems on our planet that he took this idea of the desert and applied it to a whole planet. Same thing down here on the planet Hoth. We have a polar ice world basically, and he took that and made an entire planet that was of ice. So where I'd like to start off is the role of climate, and we got to talk about what happens day to day. So when we're talking about weather, we're talking about what is going to happen at a specific time and place on the earth. So again, weather is what we can expect day to day. And it's important to understand that it's like a weather person. What they do is they go up and predict the weather every single day. And over a course of time, we might get to a place where we can predict what the possibilities will be from that day to day. And what that ends up being is what's called climate. And the climate is the average yearly conditions and temperature that we would see and precip in an area in a given year. So how this works is that we are basically taking all of our weather that consistently happens, and if we are marking it like today is 90 degrees and tomorrow might be 85, we would know that usually during this time of the year it's starting to get warmer, and that would be the weather. And then if we look at it over the course of an entire year, then we would expect what the climate would be. So the climate on Tatooine, it's a warmer temperature, it's got very little precipitation, and the weather right now outside looks like it's partly cloudy if you look up here. So why we have different climates? Climates are influenced by the latitude on the equator. So you're going to have warmer climates here on the equator. You're going to have deciduous forests and other things found up around the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn in the southern hemisphere. And then you're going to start seeing tundra and boreal forests and other things as you move further away on latitude. Winds will make patterns, so the jet stream, which I could draw really quickly here for you, the jet stream, what that is going to do is it's going to impact the weather in a different location. So the northern hemisphere has it going this direction overall, and depending on where this dip is, this would pull down cooler air to the warmer environment. So that would be what happens with the wind jet streams. And if we change this up here real quick, we could talk about the ocean currents. Why is the north hemisphere warm when we're talking about New York and over here in Europe? It's because the ocean currents are bringing up warm water from the equator, and then once it reaches a certain latitude, that water will become heavy enough and it will drop, and the ocean current will drop and go cold again and create kind of this conveyor belt of heat. So heat's moving north, and then as soon as it gets cool enough, it drops deep in the ocean and moves itself back to the south. And the shapes and height of landmass is obviously the Himalayas and the Andes Mountains, which you can see right here. That plays a huge role into the types of biomes and ecosystems that you can see. So climate, again, has some of these causes in them that makes what we can expect at different latitudes according to the jet stream and the wind and the location, the currents and heights and shape of land masses. The effects of ecosystem, because all organisms have a specific need for temperatures, it will affect what happens. So through evolution and looking at a cladistic analysis or a cladogram, you would expect that creatures that need a warmer climate would live somewhere in these latitudes. Creatures that are like polar bears, we'll leave in this area because they have adapted to that colder area. So because of the climate, the abiotic factors, those creatures have adapted to those abiotic factors over the course of time. And the temperature on the Earth stays within a range. Again, we're talking about minus 40 up here, minus 40 down here, and somewhere around, even in Death Valley at times, it might be 128-ish, 130 degrees, but that's still a pretty consistent range. And why that happens, why our Earth has a consistent range, is why I have this saran wrap here on top of my globe. What it is it's acting as the atmosphere, and it's just like a blanket on a cold night. The heat that comes from the photons of light that are hitting the sun are basically collected and stored in this atmosphere. So my saran wrap is acting as not only a barrier to keep most of the photons out, but once the photon gets through, it's also going to trap that heat in there, so it keeps it more at a consistent temperature if we have atmosphere. Mars has very little atmosphere, so it doesn't do the greenhouse effect as much. Venus has a denser atmosphere, so it holds in and collects more heat. So the greenhouse effect is happening on every planet that has an atmosphere. And again, it's my saran wrap holding in the heat. Again, very simple. Greenhouse effect, green saran wrap, trapping heat. Happens on a lot of planets that have an atmosphere. So again, sunlight, photon of light travels 8 minutes and gets stuck in the gases of the atmosphere. Some will get released, some will never even make it through. But for the most part, we are maintaining a more stable temperature because of this greenhouse effect. So how else does this apply? So the effect of latitude on climate. You'll notice that the differences in latitude is determined by the angle at which the sun is striking the Earth. So right now, if you guys are the sun, we are in wintertime because we are tipped away from you if you're the sun. Now, if we spin the United States over here, we are tipped towards you, so we're getting more direct sunlight. So that depends on how much the climate changes from summer to winter in this case. Again, the angle determines how much of the sun's surface is heated. So if the sun were here and we're right in this area, we're going to get more sunlight. Obviously, if we're down here on the bottom somewhere, we're getting more indirect, so it's going to be cooler climate. So again, here's a better chart of that. If the sun were straight out, we're going to see most direct sunlight directly at the equator. And if we're not tipped at all, like we are in spring and winter, we're going to get a lot of direct sunlight and summertime basically happening. Sunlight then up here is going to be a longer period of time. Now, if we're tipped away, then the Arctic Circle is going to get less sunlight and therefore be colder in temperature during the winter. So again, what shapes an ecosystem? Once we start talking about the abiotic factors and the climate and how it influences, now we can start looking at, okay, so what's the temperature? What's the average range of water? What's the average soil content? And it's because of these abiotic factors, now we can say, okay, here's what can grow here. Here's what can survive and reproduce in this area. And you'll see, like if we're on the planet Hoth, I'm sure that we would see polar bears or something that would look closely like that roaming around, because they can survive not only a very cool environment, but an environment that could potentially have a lot of sun for a longer period of time. Abiotic factors, again, review: temperature, soil, and anything that is non-living here. So again, we got a water content, and on your biome parentheses, you might consider putting like a snowfall range on this, and then maybe finding how much light in the summer, how much time in the winter, if you're doing like a polar biome. And there's Yoda spinning. Watch, she'll go real fast, and moving on. So again, what is an ecosystem? The ecosystems are made up of the abiotic factors and the biotic factors. Notice that there's no living organisms over here. We're only talking about the non-living things. So the dirt, the soil, the clouds, the water vapor, the lakes, the ponds, the rocks, the minerals, everything. When we talk about biotic factors, we're talking about the producers, the consumers, plants, animals, bacteria, detrivores, all those kinds of things would be here. So again, you put those both together, now we can talk about it as an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is how those biotic and abiotic factors commingle. All right, so We also can use the term, when we start talking about the biotic factors more specifically, you'll hear this word called habitat. And what a habitat is it's a fancy word for what kind of ecosystem does like a goldfish need, or an Atlantic salmon, or Darth Maul. What kind of place does it need? The difference between a habitat and a niche is that a niche is how one of these organisms would interact with its behavior, how it would get its nutrients, how it would get its food, how it would survive and reproduce in that specific habitat. So how do I get my food? How do I get my water? How do I get my nutrients? How do I get rid of all my waste? That would be what a niche is. So it's the interaction between that abiotic and biotic factor that lives in a specific environment. Please note that two creatures cannot occupy the same niche. So the basic premise of this is we have different heights of this tree, basically. This type of bird will only live up to a certain height in this tree and nest in that spot. And each one of these then is considered a different niche because of basically where they'll build their nest. So each one of them will respect each other's niche and stay out of there so they're not fighting for resources. And that's where I'm going to end this podcast. Thanks for watching.